First of all, since this is a rather special meeting, I decided to wear my jewelry. And could you just pour me some more? Thanks.
Do you trust me?
I think so. You might put a bit of gin in it, but... Well, we've all heard of Grexit. We've heard of Brexit. And now you're going to get Trexit. And you won't hear any more terrible puns, you lucky people. Comme la plupart parmi vous sont au courant du fait que je ne me présenterai pas le mois de novembre, mais je suis vraiment touché par votre présence, and I especially appreciate the fact that we have all the Westmount heads of department that have come out this evening. And I'm really quite touched that they would do that, and I really appreciate that because I must say I couldn't have done half of what I did if it weren't for a superb administration, very professional, and you all mean, every one of you, mean a lot to me. I also have to mention the presence of my wife. I think this is my wife's first council meeting, and your last. So she's no bear for punishment, and so she's decided to just come the once, but that's important. I had two decisions to make. One was, what will I do in November? And the other was, how do I go about making that decision effective? If I had run, or if I decided to run, in November, that would be my 6th term. Believe it or not, I've served 5 terms as the mayor of Westmount. And I really do think that you should leave when you feel you're at the height of your powers, at the top of your game. And I think that if I did another term, I wouldn't do it justice. So I decided that 5 terms is enough, and that sort of, well, for me, is logical to say, I should not run. I was first elected mayor actually 25 years ago, over 25 years ago, in 1991. Already I'm Westmount's longest serving mayor by a factor of 2.2. Don McCallum, he served Westmount for 8 years, from 75 to 83, 1975 to 83. And there's a fellow called Ward, whom you know quite well, I believe, Councillor Lulham. J.K. Ward served as a second mayor of Westmount from 1875 to 1873.
I'm not that old.
No, but you played, didn't you play Ward in my play? Yeah. Anyway, so that's essentially the 2 mayors who have served the longest before I came along with my 17 and a half years. There we are. I do leave the city in excellent financial and managerial health. I'm very, very proud of that. I would say that the city is better shaped financially than it was even before the mergers. For the first time in history, really, the city of Westmount has no debt. The infrastructure budget for this year is double our historical average. And we can continue at that level of investment without having to borrow any money. In a more concrete way, if you look at what our infrastructure was on our books. When I came, and most of this council came in 2009, we had $93 million of infrastructure with $27 million of debt for a net worth of $66 million. Today, we have $158 million of infrastructure, no net debt, therefore we have a net worth of $158 million. So we've well more than doubled the net worth of the city during those 8 years. And the average tax bill, in constant dollars, that is after inflation is taken into account, the average tax bill is the same as it was 2009, with the exception of the extra amount we now spend on infrastructure. So we haven't done all this and at the same time raised taxes in any way. So I think that's an accomplishment, not just for me, not just for council, that's an accomplishment for all the administration here. I'm proud of delivering the Westmount Recreation Center, the world's first underground arena, as I'm sure you've heard me say many, many times. I should have got a patent, actually, on the idea of going underground. But we came in very close to budget, and we came on time. And thanks to Tim Price and, of course, Jeff Molson, we will be raising the entire amount, and we'll get more information from our finance commissioner later on tonight. But we will meet our target of $6.5 million. That means that taxes are reduced from what would have been 21 to about 15 million. That's a substantial reduction in taxes that are paid for by donors. The first time I experimented with the idea of fundraising for a city facility was the library, which was built in 1995, where we restored the library back to its former glory, and we increased the size of the space by about 50%. And in those days, again, I came up with the idea of having a fundraising program. The idea of fundraising is not just to reduce the tax burden, it's also to make people feel they own the facility that we're building. And certainly with the library and with the WRC, I think we can honestly say that the fundraising aspect did help in making people feel it's their facility. It's not Westmount's facility, it's theirs. But I must tell you, it's my fight against the mergers and my fight for demergers, or my strategizing to make demergers happen, that in my view was my biggest accomplishment. And it gave me the most satisfaction after the fact, I must say. During the time, as my wife will remember, it was far from pleasant. But quite understandably, my 15-year-old feat of arms is not what preoccupies Westmounters today, but I do like to remember that whole period, and especially those of you who need to get to sleep fairly early and read my book in making sure this happens. I always said that it was sold for $30 and it included a guarantee of putting you to sleep within 10 minutes or your money refunded. Anyway, so it had a sort of soporific character. But nonetheless, if you ever manage to get to chapter 16 in that book, you will see where indeed I described how I engineered the demergers. And had I not forced the Liberals to make the demerger an election issue, which they didn't want to do, I got phone calls from the top of the Liberal Party saying, don't talk about demergers, we want to talk about health. It doesn't matter. 1 week into the election, on the 17th of March 2003, I had a press conference with Lawrence Partois with me, and we forced demergers into the electoral campaign. And guess what? The Liberals won 20 seats because of their promise of demerger and, of course, the anger against the forced mergers. Don't take my word for it. Bernard Landry is on record for saying they lost 20 seats to the Liberals because of the merger and the demerger promise. And I never got a letter of thanks from Premier Charry for essentially causing his election. But of course, the fact that Liberals did get elected, then they had to implement their demerger promise. Unfortunately, they only implemented a half of it, because as you know, the rules for the demerger were completely unfair and unheard of anywhere in the world. Normally, when you have a referendum, the majority, winds up winning. No, not in this one, but still. And if there had been no demergers, there would not, of course, been 14 cities on this island that demerged, and indeed 29 cities across Quebec. I do hope my book will continue to serve as a warning that the false promises of mergers and how they uselessly tear the municipal fabric apart will continue to be of service. And this is why it took so long to write it. If anybody 20 years down the road gets this bright idea that mergers will save money and make everybody happy, I do hope that my book is still around at that point to disabuse them of that notion. I've been privileged to head up the Association of Suburban Municipalities since I came back in 2009. But again, after 8 years of being president, I think they need new blood, and it's time to go. In fact, in general, it's time to go. I started in Westmount politics, believe it or not elected necessarily, but active in politics in 1980. And it all started with a letter I wrote to the Quebec government about the fact that the City of Westmount was going to allow 3 houses to be built on the lawn of Braemar. It was built, as you all know, in 1847. And I was outraged that the Westmount's laws did not protect something like Braemar. So I got involved in 1980, and then after that I got involved in the whole tax revolts that we saw in 1982, 83. I was first actually elected in 1983, and I didn't run in 87 because I was very busy with my company, Place de Béton, but I did come back in 1990. I was first elected mayor in 1991 at the age of 45. Just elected by the mergers, and I must add that the whole period that I worked on the demergers, I was a private citizen. I was not an elected official. So when people ask me to reminisce about being mayor, I think it's rather ironic that I have to talk about a period when I was actually not mayor. I called myself mayor in exile, but I was a private citizen, and I worked pro bono full-time for 2.5 years to effect demergers. And as you know, I returned again in 2009. So I've been involved in Westmount politics for 2/3 of my working life, if you assume my working life is 50, which is I've actually worked for about 50 years. I've served in office for 23.5 years, 17.5 as mayor and the rest as a councillor, which equates to nearly 1/2 of my entire working life. My political career, in a way, is a sort of a series of appearances. So whether performing on stage, waiting in the wings, or writing the script, I've always been hanging around the Westmount Theatre. As Shakespeare said, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Paid my dues, done my bit. It's time to exit. I call it Trexit, as you know. And I think knowing when to stop is actually more important than knowing when to start. So what I want to leave while on a high and full possession of my powers, I don't want to become brittle, tetchy, stale for all to see. I want to leave while I still have the capacity to do something else. This is my 3rd career. And I must tell you that my battle for cynicism against idealism rages on, and I want to leave before cynicism won. Besides, I think Westmount needs a generational change. So this is why alia iacta est, les dés sont jetés. Actually, in Latin, it's singular. Alia being feminine, singular, so it should really be aliae iactae sunt, but there we are. The French never got it straight. So my second decision, once I decided not to run in November, In fairness, I had to make that information known. I couldn't sort of just keep it to myself and my wife. So, but I couldn't maintain my habitual enthusiasm once I knew that I wouldn't be running. I don't want to be a caretaker mayor. I don't want to be a lame duck. And once I opened the door, I kept staring in that door. And that's not really healthy. That's not any way to do a job. So I didn't want to be a lame duck, either as mayor here or as president of the ASM. It's like having a sign on your back, he's leaving. I didn't want that. So having been involved with the City of Westmount for 35 years, there's another element there too. I've been here longer than just about anybody in the administration, let alone council, and to deracinate me, it's going to take a bit of time. So by leaving now, what it does allow for is a period of transition. And I think an elegant period of transition. And I can help whoever is going to replace me as mayor, but also the council and the administration. I'm not going anywhere. I don't have another job planned. I'm not stepping down because I'm going on to other things. I want to do this properly. I tidy it up with a nice little bow, and I will be around to help in that transition, and that's my promise. If a mayor steps down within 1 year of the general election, the law does allow council either to have a general election, which I don't think anybody would ever want, leaving aside the cost, but it allows council to elect an interim mayor from among themselves. So by standing down now, it's kind of like one piece of on the chessboard is being removed, but you can keep on playing chess, whereas in November there's a lot more pieces missing and it's going to be much more difficult. So I think by doing it this way, there is a period of transition when only one piece is missing. And my replacement certainly will count on me for support. And I'm nearly finished, guys. Future, whoever replaces me will not lack for things to do, of course. The Hydro Westmount needs modernization and become more autonomous as no longer necessarily as a department, but more as a kind of PME. The quality of our infrastructure is still poor, and I really would like Westmount, when it has the time or the ability and desire, to look at design, build, maintain as a method of doing infrastructure work as opposed to the traditional method. At least the greenhouse is being restored to its former 1927 glory. I just wish I could be restored to my former glory. And the southeast sector vision is very important that we continue that work. Houses of worship are becoming more and more of a question as to what do we do about recycling them as the number of parishioners drops. And of course, the sempiternal highway noise barrier, which has been an issue that's been going on for 30 years. But you can only slay one dragon at a time, and you can only create one opus at a time. So keep that in mind. Don't try to attack too many things at once. It won't happen. Outside Westmount, it's very important to understand that the mayor is not just someone concerning him or herself with what's going on in the City of Westmount, but also outside. I've always believed it's very, very necessary to work with Montreal and, of course, work with the Mayor of Montreal as partners. After all, we send half our budget to the City of Montreal. And I think having long ago shuffled off any vestige of being any kind of a suburban municipality, Westmount has an awful lot in common with Ville, as an example. So I think it behooves us to really work very closely with Montreal. The subject of over-remuneration of municipal employees has got worse in last year, 2016. The average municipal employee working for a city over 25,000 population, makes 41.5% more than the rest of the public sector. That can't go on. What that really means is, in the case of the City of Montreal, their total salary and benefits costs are $2.3 billion. Using this as a guide, they should only be paying $1.6 billion, and therefore they're overpaying $700 million a year, some of which we're paying. As you probably also know, that I believe it's important to overhaul the AGLO. One thing with the Tremblay administration, the only thing we could agree on was the fact that the AGLO didn't work, but that's about all we could agree on. And lastly, my replacement has to realize that a stake has not been driven through the heart of merger. It will always be a remote, possibly a very remote, but still a possible threat to the City of Westmount. I'm the only mayor left, really, who has lived and led the troops through those innocent pre-merger years. Those were the days when the island suburbs represented almost half the population of the island, about 800,000 people. And when I was president of the suburban mayors before the merger, I represented 27 and 28 mayors. Now we have 14 mayors and represent 240, 250,000. We have to keep that in mind. The political tectonic plates have shifted in that regard, and we have to recognize that fact. In conclusion, and this is what, one politician always told me, if you say in conclusion, you can at least buy another 10 minutes, because people are so relieved they're going to stop. You know? But in conclusion, if I could quote Tennyson, only 4 or 5 lines, but much have I seen and known, cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers. I sort of describes my demerger and merger exercises. And so I would do it all again. Linda Goulai asked me the other day, would I have done anything differently? And I guess I could be accused of hubris, but I probably would say no. I don't think so. And through it all, Westmount has remained Westmount. And Westmount has given me far more than anything I've given to Westmount. Fini.